Thomas, in the hours as we get into this trial, of course, we heard that the court had already rejected the application for a trial by jury. How significant is this? How damaging is this for the defendant?
Oh, it's a big deal. I mean, look, jury trials are an important way to ensure judicial independence. They're an important way to ensure judicial transparency, and they're an important way to ensure that the community has a voice in the criminal justice process as a whole. And so the fact that the government moved to deny Tong a jury trial and that he is only going to be tried before a three-judge panel, that's not a good start to the first national security law criminal case.
Of course, Hong Kong has a long and respected tradition of common law, and it's part of why it's such a vibrant and popular investment destination, right? To what extent does this style of conducting a trial bring it closer to Beijing's, more codified civil system?
Oh, that's absolutely right. What we've seen in a number of different cases so far is a more Beijing-style approach to the rights of criminal defendants. As you mentioned just now, Tong Kit has been denied bail and has been sitting in a jail for almost a year as he waits for his trial to get underway. That's a real departure from Hong Kong's rich common law tradition, and it's much more akin to what we see on the mainland in politically charged criminal cases like this one. Look, we still hope that Tong Kit will get a fair trial. We still hope that we're going to see a vigorous defense as the case moves forward today, but there's a lot of cause for concern.
Is there any way to reconcile Hong Kong's basic law with the national security law?
You're absolutely right that there are a lot of conflicts there. Whereas the basic law over and over again cites specific human rights protections, the national security law points in the other direction and limits basic rights. We've talked about bail. We've talked about the right to a jury trial. Those are just two of many examples where the national security law and the basic law are sort of again, pointing in really, really different directions. And it's going to be up to the judiciary to try to reconcile those differences. And they're just under enormous political pressure right now. If Beijing keeps its hands off, if the Hong Kong government keeps its hands off, they can do their job. And I hope that's what happens here.
Exactly, because courts do have the power to sort of narrow laws, right? What are you expecting on this case?
Look, it's really too hard to say. One thing I will say is that there certainly is credible evidence that Tong Kit broke the law, broke laws in Hong Kong related to assault, broke laws in Hong Kong related to, traffic safety, but whether or not the national security law and big ticket criminal charges that carry heavy criminal penalties like terrorism and subversion, they may not be the right fit here. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens as the case moves forward, and we'll have to wait and see how the judges handle some of these very difficult questions.
Thomas, I know that as a young Australian lawyer, for a lot of people, it's a rite of passage to go and practice in Hong Kong due to the similarities in the system, right? Do you expect that there would be an exodus of talent in the industry, particularly when it comes to these, very prominent, experienced, silks and High Court judges from the UK and Australian tradition? Should they stay in Hong Kong, given how the system has been changing?
Well, I certainly hope that many young lawyers will continue to stay in Hong Kong and to engage with a legal system that needs all the help that it can get. Right now, here at Georgetown, we send newly minted lawyers to Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Beijing every year, and we think they have a role to play in supporting the rule of law in all of those different places. There's no doubt that the rule of law is under threat in Hong Kong right now. And what's needed is more engagement by the international community, by smart young lawyers, and by all of us to try to get past this difficult moment.
And of course, we do have a more high-profile case with Jimmy Lai and the Apple Daily as well. What is happening on that front, and what does that really mean for the freedom of the press in the city?
Look, anytime you have several hundred police officers storming into one of the leading newsrooms in Hong Kong, you have a problem and you have a real threat to freedom of speech and freedom of the press in Hong Kong. And what's particularly troubling about the events of the past week is that you have, according to press reports, Apple Daily being targeted over its journalistic product. In other words, they're being targeted for specific articles that they have run over the past several months. Now, I'm a regular reader of Apple Daily, both in English and Chinese, and I have not seen anything that would constitute a legitimate threat to national security. So there's a real question mark here as to what's going on in terms of that particular raid and the arrests that have stemmed from that over the past few days. And just one last point, which is to say that it does seem that Apple Daily is being targeted, and a lot of people are asking if the goal here is more a political one, to shut down Apple Daily rather than to enforce the law in an even-handed way.
Right, and you can say what you like about whether you appreciate the tabloid style of journalism or their editorial coverage, but I think most people are saying that they have a role to play in a healthy, free press and democratic society, right? Last question for you. Are we seeing the sort of operational reach of the security law go beyond just, journalism, the press, as well as the court of law? Because, anecdotally, we're seeing it across education and other areas as well.
No, that's absolutely right. And that's another troubling aspect of the national security law and its rollout over the past year now. Look, all of the attention in the first couple of months after the national security law was passed was on who is going to be arrested, who has violated the national security law, what's going to happen to Jimmy Lai. And those are all very important questions. But now, just as you're saying, we're seeing much more attention being paid to how is the education sector, how are the education officials handling the national security law, how are union officials handling the national security law, what kind of movies will be censored under the national security law.
Right.
So we're coming into a much more complicated phase.